very little pictures because we will be actually talking about the language of forensics. Okay, and this is one of the most challenging aspect of what we do is to be able to learn the language of the lawyers. Okay, the law's language. Okay, so that when you present your work, you are able to communicate to the opposite side. Okay, and funny as it is, the English language is what we predominantly used, at least this group, had a long struggle against the Latin and the French. Okay, so just give you a little bit background. During the time of King James, okay, one of the British leaders, he worked very hard to trying to establish English language as their national language. Okay, you know, this goes way back, and at that time the predominant language is Latin. So he published one of the very first books on the English language, which is the Bible. Okay, so we call it the King James Bible. It's written in languages of Dao, Dai, and so forth. You know, language that we don't use today. So there are many versions of Bibles that's been translated over and over, but that was one of the original. Okay, and the reason he wanted to publish that is so that his people can read the Bible using their own language, which is English. Okay, but the legal system today, still we have to borrow a lot of our lingos and languages from the Latin. Okay, and so today's lecture we're gonna actually go through and learn a lot of those. Okay, and you may not have the background of Latin, but using English as your predominant professional language, we actually come across a lot of Latin words. Okay, we just don't, consciously realize those are actually Latin. And I'm not talking about Latin-based words. I'm talking about taking literal Latin words and use in our daily application. Okay, but even before that, how does a job start? Okay, that's really one of the most challenging part. Okay, because even after you graduate, okay, you may be hired into a consulting company. Okay, and one of the most difficult thing that for an engineering student is once you get into a job, how does everything, you learn so much, how do you apply them into real life? Okay, that's always a challenge. And if you work and so it's very important for you to get a good mentor after you graduate. Okay, because that person, whether she or he, will be the one that would take your hand and show you how to be a professional civil engineer. Okay, and so it's regardless of a big company or small company, you need that one person that guides you. Okay, and in a typical company setting for forensics, you will be performing almost like an apprentice. Okay, so a strong forensic engineering company, they have a set of established either notes or practice forms and so forth that they will transfer to you, and you're supposed to learn. Okay, and that is how you get into. And you may be traveling with some of the professional engineers in the beginning, so you learn how things are done. Okay, so there is in an environment where we don't have a whole lot of formal forensic engineering curriculum available, this is the best those companies can do. Okay, and so, but as a professional engineer, the first thing that you do when you start a job is always you got contact by somebody. Okay, either it's a lawyer or an individual, a property owner, or somebody who needs an investigation. Okay, so they come to you, however that they found out about you doing this work, Who knows? Okay, but they will approach you. Okay, and you'll have an initial conversation. Okay, they will be telling you, oh, Mr. So and so, are you able to do this investigation? I have a failure, and this is what I think what happened and so forth. And then you will through the discussion you understand what's going on, and then at that time you either ask, hey, can I come and see what happened? Can we have a face-to-face meeting? Or if you think you're comfortable to handle the job, you would just tell them, okay, this is something I can do. Let me draft out a contract or some kind of agreement. Then, we can start doing the work. Okay, and so at this point, you pretty much understand the problem. Okay, and so in your initial memorandum, you need to define. Okay, I'm going to investigate in Altonaga a building collapse. Okay. In your agreement, you will write some basic information. The building collapse happened on this date at this time, okay, and what is involved, 2-story building completely gone or whatever. So what you are doing at this point is really defining the problem, okay. You don't have to tell people how you approach the investigation, but your job is that, your company, SL&G, okay, consulting, will be engaged in this project as the investigator, okay, and express our professional opinion and so forth, okay. And in there, you probably will give a budget, okay, so you estimate we may cost this much and so forth, but usually not in the initial agreement, okay. And then once you decide that this is something that you can do professionally within your expertise, okay, and then you will, and you have determined there is no conflict, okay. It's not something that you don't feel comfortable defending, and it's really, really important, especially if that incident is somebody you related, your wife's company, your husband's company, and so forth. So those potential conflicts you need to determine even early on, okay? And once you determine there is no conflict, you can express a non-biased professional opinion about that investigation. Then you proceed with the contract, okay? Now, a lot of times when people come to you, they don't necessarily know what they are asking, okay? Hey, I'm just not happy with how they built my house. I think it's failed, okay? But you as the engineering expert, you obviously know more, okay? So in the process, you really are serving as an advisor, okay? And so you will teach the people and let them understand what is involved. And sometimes, maybe even in the beginning, you will already tell them, I don't think you have a case. Your case is really weak. So please understand that, I'm not trying to discourage you, but I think, your case, may not be the right party to go after, or this is a natural cause. I don't think you have a case, okay? And so it is okay because you are serving as an advisor to them, okay, based on your professional knowledge. And then compensation, okay? Even early on, a lot of times we give them an estimate, but there need to be an understanding that as you get involved, especially in investigation case, sometimes you need additional work. Sometimes maybe even way more than your initial estimate, okay? And so the first site visit becomes extremely important, okay? So you can decide on when you wanted the compensation, okay? So in other words, you can break down your cost in phases, okay? So you can let them know, I'm going to come for a one-day investigation, and I'll give you a basic assessment, how extensive we have to do the investigation, okay? And maybe even some opinion at this point. But understand that at that moment, everything that you do, you say, you write down is already professionally binding, Okay, so it's already legal binding. Okay, so you go and visit and you look at, oh my goodness, this building was 5 times bigger than I imagined. Okay, I have to go to every room and that will take, a month. Okay, then, just let the client know. And then this is what your estimate of the cost. Okay, if you work for a professional company that has been doing this for a long time, they usually have enough experience to come up with a reasonable cost. Okay, once you have that done, usually the lawyers will ask you some critical questions. Now, forensic is a little bit different from construction or other engineering works in the sense that you don't have a lot of liability issue. Okay, so in other words, in the Western societies, when you do a professional work, such as design and so forth, there is always a professional insurance associated. Okay, and if you work for a company that does forensic work, usually they have the insurance, cover all the employees. Okay, and so you can do that. But if you are serving as an independent investigator, you may have to be required to purchase your own insurance. Okay, so those are very important, at least in the Western society, that you are required. But the forensic, because of its unique nature, okay, because you're not involving in design, you're not involving in the building, okay, construction. So your professional insurance may be less, okay, but nonetheless, it's good practice to have some kind of professional insurance. Okay, and then after your agreements, after your contract is signed, then you are free to start your investigation. Okay, then you start getting busy. Okay, collecting information, start thinking, doing all the drawings, review all the drawings. Okay, so take a lot of time. Okay, and then you form your team like we discussed yesterday. Okay, but when you take the team out, you have to realize that again, the unique nature of forensic is that you're dealing with a law-based investigation. Okay, so all the things, all the critical practices, like if you have to remove or disturb the incident sites and stuff, you have to make sure all your team members fully understand. They can't just walk around and do whatever they want. Okay, and so that aspect is very different from other engineering practices. Okay, and how do you collect evidence? How do you collect information and so forth? Okay, and so there is a whole set of detail that we included in the PowerPoint. As I mentioned yesterday, when you interview witnesses, okay, which is extremely important, make sure you document and make sure that you do it in a very friendly manner. Okay, you are not there and one of the most important thing is you have to make people understand that you are there not, you don't work for one particular party. I mean, yes, you are paid by either the defendant or the plaintiff, but you are creating a neutral, okay, so you are not representing the interests of any party, okay, because people sometimes get defensive, okay. You're coming onto my property, if you're not working for me, maybe you're trying to prove that I'm wrong, or, so people always have that mentality. So present yourself as a very, very friendly manner would be very helpful, okay. And this is a sample inspection sheet. Okay, so this is our in-house development. So you will notice that there is a wide area for you to either do some drawings, schematics, and then there are details. Okay, so this is particular one for building inspection. So is this a concrete building? In other words, you have to profile your problem. Okay, and we will talk about in the structure and the geotech sections, so we will talk in detail. Okay, how do you profile? So there's two very important aspects. One is to profile the problem. For example, are you talking about a beam failure? Are you talking about, a bridge failure, a building failure? They are different. Okay, and then is it a foundation problem? Is it a retaining wall problem? External, or is it a pile? In other words, you have to be able to profile that particular problem. There's two reasons. One is, the failure mode may be different, okay? And so you can almost isolate the type of problem. And then the second thing is the failure mode. So you have to be able to describe how it failed, okay? Is this, for example, geotech, is this a soil liquefaction problem, earthquake or non-earthquake, okay? Like I described yesterday, if you have a groundwater path change, okay, and some of the soil liquefied, your foundation suddenly have a differential settlement, okay? You have to be able to describe what is that failure mode, okay? And all of those are important because being able to document the specific problem to that case helps you in analyzing the problem and as well as collecting data, okay? And then there are some of the things that you can predefine, okay? And in some cases, you may need some kind of a rating method. In other words, mathematics is what engineers do, right? And sometimes it may be difficult to verbalize problems. It's always a good practice to be able to quantify. So, if you look at a beam, and the beam has a large deformation, okay, then you measure how much it deformed. But does that mean the beam completely collapsed? Maybe not, right? But if you have a big chunk of the beam, a concrete beam, for example, that already disappeared, it's not safe. So maybe you can give a safe rating of certain quantity, okay? So usually we use 1 to 3, okay? 0 means no damage, okay? So those are the kind of things that you should set up, okay? Would help you later on in remembering what the problem is, okay? Oh, and in your PowerPoint, I added one, enlarged so that as a sample for you, okay? And when you do eyewitness interview, it's very important to document not only the time of the incident, but also the time you talk to that particular person, okay? Because when you go through the litigations, a lot of times the questions and the concerns will always be related to, they will be asking specifics, okay? On this day, have you talked to Mr. So-and-so, okay? And then, yes, I did, okay? And what is the content of your conversation? Because you may be talking to the same eyewitness multiple times, okay? So those are very important documentation. And then you'll be asking a lot of specifics such as, who are you talking to? Okay, their names, their professions, what they do, their age, and so forth, okay? And then what do they know about the incidents? Okay, so for example, here we give example, knowledge of a construction failure, okay? Do you know what they are doing here? A lot of neighbors doesn't know, they don't, especially in the West, people don't talk to their neighbors, okay? Then, I don't know, something happened, so then he's not a useful witness, right? Okay, and it is also very important to document the specifics of what they conversed, okay? For example, when we were in the Philippines investigating one of the major hurricanes, we talked to a lot of the local people, and some of the engineers were actually being able to explain what happened, okay? Because when the hurricane comes at very high wind speed, everything becomes dark. You can't see what's happening. But they were describing to us, hey, in the very strong winds, we actually hear high-pitched wind within the wind, okay? And so recent hurricane events, we have been able to observe what we call the tornadoes within hurricanes, okay? So within that big cyclone, there are actually small bursts of wind gusts and turbulence that happen and cause significant damage that otherwise would not have happened, okay? And so those are really important information and observations. when we were in Vizag in 2014, and we were doing the investigation, and the locals were telling us there were two winds, okay? I think one in the afternoon, one in the morning, right? And they're coming different directions. And we were able to look at some buildings and actually physically see that it was damaged by two different directional forces, okay? And so those are important information that you wanted to document as best as you can, okay? And then if they allowed, always have their contact information, okay? The reason is because sometimes your memory may not serve you properly. You may want to go back and re-interrogate them about what happened, okay? And so it's always useful. And it's very important that you document, write notes in front of them, because it makes them feel serious, okay? And then they will not change their stories. Next time you talk to them, it becomes serious. There are a lot of people that I interview. They actually remember me, okay? I mean, in America, it's not hard to remember Chinese, but they actually remember many details about me as a person, okay? So that would be helpful because you're building up a relationship, okay? And then when you ask them questions again, it becomes easy, okay? The format of interview can be, most of the time is very casual, okay? He's standing there, you're standing here, you walk by, and then start talking to them and asking them questions, okay? So those are not difficult to do, but some people have the tendency of wanting to walk around, okay? And that is when it becomes tricky, okay? So, a farmer who works in the yard next door to this building that collapsed, he had no problem. He would want to go in there and start, picking up. See, this is the door that went down. This is the time when you tell them, please don't do that. This, you may be disturbing the evidence, okay? And so those kind of interactions becomes really critical, okay? And then once you discuss with them what happened, usually when you go back, you have to organize your notes, okay? And you may have to call them to clarify some of the points that you mentioned. Did you say that you heard a bang or a bong? Because a bang and a bong means two totally different things, right? And so those are the things that you need to clean up. And especially when you talk to people who are local, they may have a different way of describing, their local dialect or language, okay? And so being able to clarify all of this becomes really critical, okay? Documentation. So in documenting the evidence, it becomes really critical. And this is the part where your advanced degree helps, okay? So with all my reports, I use the format of our technical publications. How do you reference? How do you cite your references and so forth? Okay, now, the way that we, in engineering profession, the way that we do our journal or conference publications, which many of you will be familiar because you're in the advanced degree, it's not necessarily the way that the lawyers do, okay? And the reason is because in the lawyer setting, the referencing format usually associated with year, time, and so forth. So theirs are more elaborate, okay? And then you will also find out that in your technical reporting methods, sometimes it gets deviate from professional writing, okay? So, for example, you may interview one person multiple times, okay? So in engineering profession, we'll be listing all the references 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And then you just write in your appendix in your documentation. So Mr. Jones said such as, and then your reference 1, okay? That will not be acceptable in a legal document, okay? They wanted you to write down Jones, comma, date and time. Okay, and so you just have to kind of learn all this difference between engineering writing and legal writing. Okay, but it is important for you to recognize that there are differences between the two. Okay, okay. Synthesis. Synthesis is a very abstract process. Okay, so most of the time you'll be mentally digesting all the information that you have collected, and then you have to synthesize it and present it in a way that people can understand. Okay, and so in the process you have to develop the history of the failure. Okay, so here we write design and construction history. Okay, because we're thinking more specific to a new project. Okay, but if you're dealing with a structure that was built, maybe a historical structure, a temple nearby that has some kind of failures, then your history may be a little more elaborate. Okay, again, using the St. Lotus Church, St. Joseph College here, the church is very old. I think our last investigation, the church is already 150 years old, but it has water damage. Okay, so you go in there, you are looking at a building that has more history than you do. Okay, so you have to go back in, and when you write the history of this building, it would no longer be just construction, but how many times it flooded, and during which year, and so forth. So that elaboration itself takes a long time to build up the case. Okay, but you always need a little history. And then the failure incident. Okay, so failure incidents usually are much dealing with a much shorter time period. Okay, it may happen suddenly one day, one night. Okay, or maybe it happens throughout a few months. Okay, but people, when they recognize there is a failure, especially creep or fatigue or slow process failures, they at some point they have recognized there is a failure. Okay, a common person would be able to tell. Okay, and that becomes very important for you to document exactly what happened, because people are not trained in engineering language, so they would not be able to tell you, it creeped over a period of 2 months. It's up to you to establish that history. Okay, and so being able to educate them and tell them what's the problem and help them to reconstruct the time event becomes extremely important. Okay, and at the same time make sure that you don't put words in their mouth so that they don't just say everything that you told them. Okay, because people are smart. Learning is a passive process. So when you start talking to them, the next time they will learn, oh yeah, Mr. So-and-so told me this is a fatigue problem. Wow, what is fatigue? Unless you explain to them, they think the building is tired. It needs to sleep, right? Okay. Okay, and then as I mentioned earlier, you have to be able to describe the failure mode and the failure profile, and then develop the failure hypothesis. Okay, so this three process is actually really critical. Okay, and the reason is because usually, especially engineering problems, it's not just it's progressive. Okay, by the time you get to see a major construction failures, actually multiple things has happened. Okay, but you wanted to go to find out the root of the problem, and also the site itself may be highly disturbed. Okay, so being able to sift through all that chaos and then find out the problem, you have to be able to describe what happened in a much clearer way. Okay, and so that's what the profiles and then once you start having that, then you create your hypothesis. Okay, hypothesis is usually a very condensed description of what happened. Okay, so it may be something as simple as, okay, Jones's house experienced significant problem, especially strong forcing during the 2016-2009 windstorm. Okay, and then you may write a few additional words like the failure of the structure involves the western wall of the building was forced in by strong wind. Okay, so in a very short, condensed language, you're trying to include all of this. That's your hypothesis. And then next thing is, from that hypothesis, you wanted to go in and figure out what are the evidence that you need to help supporting that. Okay, so using Jones' house as an example, again, you may be taking pictures. Okay, here you see the wall is literally leaning. Okay, and then you may use a better way to present. Okay, that's the west wall. Okay, and then if for whatever reason the east wall also caved in, okay, is that related to the west wall cave in? You have to establish that correlation. Okay, and then either using drawings or using some kind of testing or some kind of validation method. You have to build that up, okay? And this is the part where a lot of people don't understand that it goes beyond somebody who's an expert in building buildings, okay? Because you need investigation. You need to construct the story, okay? And if you're not a trained forensic expert, the best you can come up with would be, oh yeah, based on my 20 years of building buildings, I have seen this kind of failures, multiple times. And that's all you can say, okay? I'm sure it's due to, wind force, okay? And believe me, a lot of times, especially when we have a major disaster kind of investigations, the failure modes are actually very surprising, okay? So, for example, when we were in the Philippines, again using Philippines, because that was one of the rare occasions when we have to investigate the difference between wind damage and water damage of a structure. Okay, because when hurricane comes, you have strong wind, right? But in the coastal area, it also brings strong waves. Okay, so when a building was damaged, is it because of the water that impacts on the building, or is it because the wind blow the roof, the building down? Okay, there are signs that you can tell. Okay, and we'll go through some of this. Okay, but that is very important. And one of the things that we found, for example, there was a guard house. Okay, it was severely damaged. It's almost impossible for water to cause that kind of damage. I mean, the steel was literally bent. The steel for preventing cars from impacting was literally bent. Okay, and so we look at the case, and everybody was just curious, all the experts on site. And then, talking to the security guard, then he revealed, water actually lift one of the cars on the streets, and the water bring that car, and the car hits the guard house, and that is how they got damaged. Okay, so is that water damage? Is that wind damage? No, it's not. It's impact. Okay, and you literally have to reconstruct that history. Otherwise, everybody will be amazed. Wow, water can bend irons, and totally ridiculous. Okay, again, just a little bit of elaboration on the difference between a legal and a forensic profession. Okay, so you have to keep in mind the lawyer, under unusual conditions, that have the engineering training. Okay, and so they are well versed with law languages, and you are the forensic, you are the engineer, so you are less well versed with the legal language, and so you have two different people speaking different languages trying to work together on one case. Okay, and so it's very important that you have a mindset of making sure that you have all these things that defines a forensic engineer. Okay, for example, you must have the expertise. Okay, so when you accept a case, okay, make sure that you can handle the case. Okay, and the other thing is neutrality. Okay, again, the last 2 days I have elaborated multiple times. Lawyers, their job is to defend for the guys that own them, okay? And you, as a forensic expert, your job is neutrality. You are expressing your opinions based on your expertise, okay? You are not there to defend one side or the other, okay? So being able to keep that professionally clear is very important, okay? And sometimes that's how you earn respect from the lawyers, okay? And the next thing is court presence, okay? So when I started my career in forensics, I was young and less experienced, and sometimes it can be scary, okay? Because you are sitting there and the lawyer's job is to make you feel insecure, okay? Because they want to question you, okay? And sometimes they may go overboard and become really critical, okay? So I remember in one particular case, so if you look at my dossier, my professional experience, my CV, okay, it sounds like I'm a guy that do all the large testing, okay, because I do blasting, I was in the field, do a lot of transmission towers, testing and so forth. So that particular case, I was actually involved in the testing of the tiles, building tiles. It's a very small job. And so the opposing lawyer asked me very legitimate question. Dr. Chen, your dossier shows that you are doing things outdoor. Okay, what do you know about tiles? Well, he didn't know this, but my family owns construction company. So ever since I was very young, I've been working in laying out this kind of stuff. So it didn't show in my portfolio, but I told him I probably lay enough tiles to qualify as an expert. But the important thing is not how I'm trained. In this particular case, I'm actually defending my opinion based on my investigation. So what happened is my student and we have gone through the failed building, and then we dig up a lot of those tiles and prove that the tile fell because they didn't construct it properly. There are a lot of dust underneath the tile. So the epoxy that they used to bond it to concrete didn't work. Why? Because the dust has caused the epoxy to fail. Okay, so it had nothing. I remember that lawsuit was they trying to sue the manufacturer of the tiles, saying that they're substandard. That's why it fell prematurely. But that was not the case. It was the contractor who laying the tiles didn't do a proper job in cleaning up the concrete. Okay, and then they put the epoxy, and that's how it fell. Okay, so we have picked up several of those and document that there are dust underneath. Okay, so it's not about my expertise or anybody's expertise. Okay, I'm not a tile manufacturer. So see, that's what the lawyers trying to disqualify your expertise based upon, because if you go down the path, then they'll be hiring another guy who's 20 years older than you. Have you built more buildings than this guy? Then how can you be an expert? He's the true expert. You know what I'm saying? It's not a fight against qualification. Okay, every forensic work should be stand upon the scientific investigation technique that you practice behind. Okay, and that's extremely important. Okay. Another thing is it's extremely. I show a picture of the oldest story in the Bible. Okay, so Cain and Abel are two brothers. Okay, and one God loves, the other one God dislikes. Okay, because his heart wasn't pure, and so the one that God disliked killed the other brother. Okay, and so a very famous word came out of the Bible. It's called the brother's keepers. Okay, so we as a professional engineer, we are all like brothers. Okay, so your job is to keep your brother doing things right, but you are not here to pass judgment. Okay, it's the court of law that passes judgment. Okay, you're guilty because you didn't do a good practice, or you're guilty, you didn't build the house right. It's not your job to do so. Okay, so a lot of times you, as a professional, you have to be very careful in how you express yourself, okay? And definitely do not, in your defense, point finger, okay? In other words, it's not appropriate for you to come and say, oh, that contractor, I know, he's always wishy-washy, doing really bad job. It's not your responsibility to make that kind of comments, okay? Your job is to sit there and defend the case based on what you have done, okay? I have shown you, for example, the Hyatt Regency case, okay? We treat Mr. Galen, Jack Galen, with high respect, okay, as I described the other day, okay? Not because he is the owner of a failed engineering firm that we point fingers, but because we all may, at some point in our career, fail in our professional responsibility, okay? But upholding one another so that we can do the best as our profession is our responsibility. And that is the principle behind brothers keepers concept, okay? And that is why I don't know if the engineering ring and all those practices has come to India yet, okay? But in America and in Canada as well, it starts in Canada. So we have a professional engineer ring, okay? So that is a reminder that, our profession is to do the best you can in design, build, okay? And so many of us have a ring that represents, okay? But we as a profession have to remind one another that we have to do the best we can, okay? Because we are trained professionals, okay? And functions and responsibility. This is not related to a case, but just in general. Okay, forensic engineers by nature should be able to translate what we know educational-wise to something that people can understand. Okay, so I can write a technical report full of engineering jargons, but that is not going to serve the lawyer or the court any good because they don't understand what you're talking about, okay? And so being able to put the lingos down a bit and let people understand the true cause of the failures is extremely important, okay? And the responsibilities of a forensic expert also include, other than investigation, how you prepare your report, okay? And also, how do you testify in court? That all becomes very important, okay? Your attire, okay? So every time that I go to talk to the lawyers and representing, I would dress formally, okay? Because you're representing our profession, okay? Wearing shorts and then sitting there does not project, or with dyed hair or, nose rings or, tattoos, are not necessarily. I mean, it's common now that in Western, young engineers have tattoos and stuff. But even so, they would dress a white shirt to cover those up, because you're representing a profession. Okay. Okay. So a little bit about development of hypothesis. In fact, this is the part where it becomes really, really critical. Okay. You have some kind of opinion that will generally formed, okay, as you get more and more involved in the case, okay? But you have to understand and always keep in mind that what you see are not necessarily what actually happens, okay? Because usually in an accident or incident site, things are very complicated. Okay, multiple things may have happened. And so, as a engineer, when you go through that, okay, you have to give yourself a lot of warnings that, what you see are not necessarily what actually happened, okay? And also understand that no matter how good you perform as an investigator, you will always miss something. Okay, simply because you can't see everything. Okay, and that understanding is extremely important in in the process of when you're setting up your hypothesis. Okay. And later on, I will also describe, why we will never be perfect in our investigation. Okay. And simply because you cannot be able to tell everything from one visit, okay, you realize that the hypothesis forming process is a repeated, it's an evolution. Okay, in other words, when you first encounter into a case, you don't right away form your opinion, because as more evidence comes, okay, your opinion will swing, okay, and you will have more dimensions that you see the problem, okay, and so don't come to judgment too quickly, okay. That's what I'm trying to tell you, okay, and this is the most critical part. Everyone is a critic. In other words, it's human nature, okay. When we see something happen, we always trying to form opinion, okay. And so keeping that in mind is extremely important, because you have to make sure that you don't get swayed, okay, one way or the other, okay. A grandma came by and just tell you, that I know it's going to happen, I know it 20 years ago this is going to happen because they didn't do this right and so forth. Yeah, okay, that's her opinion, right? It does not necessarily be what happened in the case. So being able to maintain an unbiased mentality is what, important in this process, okay? Okay, causation analysis, cause analysis. This is one of the most difficult part, okay? And for two reasons. One is, as I described just now, okay, that everybody has an opinion. So when you involve in the case, when you start talking to people about what happened, many opinion has already been embedded in your mind, okay? Already give you a strong inference. But at the same time, to establish the true cause of a problem, okay, it's like doing a chemical testing. You have to take all the improbable causes away, okay? So from your engineering training, okay, you should have realized that that process needs to be scientific. In other words, you cannot just say, no way. That wall collapsed because of groundwater? No way. That's a structural problem. That's geotech problem. It's not the reason. You cannot simply do that. Okay? You ask yourself the question, what is the evidence? Okay? Where is the evidence? How can I construct the evidence? How can I invent evidence? Okay? So a mock-up test is always something that we do, okay? A mock-up is build a model of what happened, okay? And that sometimes would help. You cannot build a mock-up of an entire building. Sometimes it's hard, okay? But I will show you throughout these 2 weeks, some of the mock-up tests that we do, okay? But if you are doing for example, that window frame, okay? If that window frame fell, you can easily build a mock-up. In other words, you can, in your lab, build part of that window frame, okay? Maybe cut part of that out, okay? For example, water intrusion, okay? You build that and then you spray water from the other end and see if water would actually indeed come through, and how does it come through. Those are what we call the mock-up specimen, okay? So in the forensic investigation, your testing or your causation establishment can be done in numerous ways, okay? Setting up something that's almost look identical to actual scenario is one way. The other way will be material testing. Trying to, for example, this failure is due to concrete material, okay? So can you, in your lab, recreate the same kind of material that they use? For example, the concrete mix, so you use their concrete mix and then build multiple cylinders and then crash them and see how they fail, okay? Or if it's a chemical change, erosion or, chloride attack, you can take them and then replicate and then try in your lab multiple times. Okay, but that experimental setup needs to be designed. Okay, just like when you are in your MTech, how do you design your proposal? How you do an investigation? It's the same process. Okay, and then you just make 50 specimens, and then each one has a variation, and how do you prove your point? Okay, so those are all valid methods. Numerical simulations. Okay, can you build a finite element model? Okay, doesn't have to be full scale, but just enough to show, hey, there is a stressing because of such and such. Okay, so it's up to your imagination to come up with that method to prove that the cause of this problem is. Okay, but when you do that kind of design, you always have to keep in mind you're not doing one test to prove you're right, but you should do 100 tests to prove that all other possibilities are not likely. Okay, this is a very different concept. Okay, one is to prove this is right. That's what most people do. But as a scientist, you're wanted to prove all the rest are wrong. Okay, and that is the scientific approach. Okay, and that is why some of those can be expensive. Okay, and then building up, finally, your conclusion should be this is the most probable case. If you can assign a statistic number to your probability of a case, would be extremely helpful. Okay, because everybody understands probability. Okay, so if you have 3 causes and you'll be able to assign, okay, cause number 1, 60% sure that's how it happened based on my experiments. Cause number 2, 30%, cause number 3, 20%, and then cause number 4, 10%. That would be very helpful to the lawyer and also give you credibility in the actual defense. Okay, because the judge will ask, how did you come up with 60% for cause 1? Oh, I did 200 experiments and see this is all the specimens I did, and then 60 of them fell in this case. Everybody understands. Okay, you're using very basic high school statistics to prove a point. Okay. Report of findings. So report writing is again extremely important. Okay, you need to be able to demonstrate professionally. Okay, so professionalism in civil engineering sometimes can be tricky. Like some people like to use passive voice. Okay, unlike journalism, they like to use the active voice. Okay, I went to this place and I found that wall collapsed. That's active voice. Okay, because I am the one that found. But then in passive voice, it will be that wall has been collapsed during my investigation. Okay, so the wall becomes the subject, and then as a result, you use passive voice. Okay, so why engineers do that, I don't know. Okay, just like we discourage students when you write a journal paper, you don't write, I did 200 experiments. We always say 200 experiments has been done. You don't use that first person viewpoint. Only engineers does that. I sometimes work with scientists and they like to use I did and so forth. Okay, which is refreshing because it's very straightforward. But engineering doesn't do that. Okay, so you just have to know and recognize that there are differences in the way that we express our opinions. Okay, but you should always make sure that you have a high standard. So I do my practice through a law firm most of the time. Okay, and so every time I submit my report, I always ask the lawyer, please go through, because I may be writing in a hurry, and there are some, sometimes my tenses may be inconsistent. So have a second eye to review that would be very helpful. Okay, and as I described, Professor Henry Petrosky, his wife is an English major, so that always helps. Okay, so I'm not suggesting that you should go and marry an English major, but professionally, we need a second eye, okay, just to keep our job proper, okay. And this is the time that have a colleague working closely with you that you can feel comfortable to let them go through your draft writing is also very helpful, okay. And always remember your report. If the lawyer requires you to write a report, that is a legal binding document, okay. So the moment you submit your report, you can't make any changes. You can't go back and say, oh, I think I write this wrong, okay. That cannot happen, okay, because there are many times when I have to do a defense, the lawyer will be asking you questions. Okay, this document that you sent to this gentleman, your client, on this date, okay, why is this different from another one? So I have the habit of, because sometimes they demand you give them report quickly, okay, if they demand a report. And I don't feel comfortable telling them that this is my final conclusion. So I always have an interim report, okay. So, hey, this is what I found up to this time. I have more investigation. They say, okay, fine, you can do more investigation, but give me this report. So I would write interim, okay. And when the opposite lawyers ask you questions like, oh, you have what? Version 1, 2, 3, 4? Yes, because, I was asked to submit what I have studied up to that point. Okay, so that's why I have an interim. But, later on I have found more data and I have more analysis, so I have a final report. Okay, so they will ask you, so which one do you want me to read? Oh, the final report. Okay, it's okay. You can elaborate, okay, but always make sure that when they ask you questions, you have to be very precise, okay. And there are many times when I was giving a deposition, that is, the opposite and your lawyers both ask you questions even before you go to the court, okay. They will be taking out a lot of those sticky notes, okay, because everything now they are document all the evidence, okay. So this evidence 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 50, 80, 90 sticky notes, okay. Everything they will document very clearly, okay. So when you are in that case, you realize everything that you do is very significant, even the picture that you submit, okay. So that is really, really critical, okay, to keep that in mind. You can't change once they put a sticky note. This is evidence number 25, okay. You cannot change anymore, okay. And because if you change, then you become you can go to jail if you suddenly swap. Oh, that was well, unless you make everybody all agree, okay, all parties. Like, oh, so for example, sometimes I take my kids with me to do investigation, and they will be, in one of the picture, it will be like, oh, this is not evidence. This is a picture of my son, because it's so cute. I want to take a picture of him, and so we'll pull that out of the evidence. Those are allowed. Okay, and oral report. So sometimes you are required to give an oral presentation. Usually not a full presentation. Usually they will just ask you, okay, verbally tell us what happened. Okay, what have you done for the case? Okay, and what is your opinion? So you'll be able to sit down and then start talking in a concise manner. Okay, it is really difficult to do an oral report, especially if you are not a public speaking kind of person. Okay, so for us, that's what we do. We give lectures every day, so we feel comfortable stand up and then just talk. Okay, but even that you have to be careful because in the lecture room, maybe sometimes you tell a little joke, ah ha ha, everybody laugh, to release the pressure. But when you're in the court, please don't. It's not a good time to be funny. Okay, you can be polite, but don't be funny. Okay, and those are the critical elements that you need to. Mannerism is extremely important. Okay, and as I mentioned many times, because everything that you do when you have the contract in your hands becomes critical, legal binding. So sometimes the lawyers ask you not to submit a report. Well, if you don't have a written document, how are you going to remember everything that you have done? So you may have a little dossier that has your stuff that you may be able to bring it to help you memorize, but then it becomes tricky because the opposite side may ask you, okay, go through your notes, but you keep referring to that picture numerous times. Can we keep that picture? Okay, are you willing to submit that as an evidence? If you don't, then everything that you talk about that picture need to be scratched from need to be taken out from the records. So those becomes extremely critical, and that is why it's always good when you do a deposition, have your lawyer besides you. Okay, so he can help you decide whether that would help the case or that would actually incriminate your finding. Okay, so those are details that you just have to learn as you practice. Okay. And the final report, as I described, there are a lot of details that goes into it, but always remember every word, every sentence that you put in there, all have meanings. Okay, so don't elaborate, write like a prose or a poem. No, you want to write it as concise, as professional as possible. Okay. Just a little bit on the format. Okay, so there are many ways that you can create your own. Usually, if you work for a company, they have a standard format for reporting. Okay, but you should have one that describes the purpose of your study and the history of what happened. Okay, description of the project, your observation, your testing, your analysis, and your conclusions. Okay. During the past several years, Dr. Shen has started to develop his own format of reporting. Okay, so hypothesis is, you don't have to, but if you have a format, it's helpful when you get really busy. You have many cases that you have to investigate, so it's always helpful for you to have a standard format that you can always follow. Okay. And then recommendation is not always necessary. Okay, as I described, there are several different levels of forensic expertise. Okay, some cases they may ask you, can you tell us how would you repair the structure? Okay, if you have the expertise, do tell. If you don't, just tell them no. You may have to find somebody else to do that. Okay, it's not required. Okay. And finally, appendix. Okay, so usually my report is very concise, very short, but I have long appendix. Why? Because you may have 500 pictures. Okay, all of them are important, but they don't necessarily support your writing. Okay, because you want to be concise. So I may include 5-6 pictures in my report, but then whatever that you have that you think is important should be all in the appendix. Okay, and believe me, when you start getting involved in this kind of cases, the appendix become very big. Okay, so I remember in one lawsuit related to blasting, it was a coal mine blasting, surface mining case. When I accept the case, they actually sent me boxes and boxes of blast records. All of it print out. So the lawyers waste a lot of kill a lot of trees because they have to document so much. Okay, so those boxes and boxes of blast records are still in my office, because you wanted to keep them for a long time. Yeah.
So do you have the freedom to discard all the irrelevant evidence which you find under law, or?
No, if they send it to you, you cannot discard. Yeah, because when they send it to you, they already document this is evidence. Yeah.
But the one which you have collected?
Yes, you may. Yeah. In fact, you are encouraged to do. Yeah. Yeah. Because again, the principle is you want to be concise. You don't want to have 500 pictures, only one that really relevant, the rest are all useless. Yeah. So you wanted your own evidence, but remember the moment that you submit to your lawyer, all of them become important. Before that, it doesn't matter. Okay. You can within a certain time. Okay. So you have to remember that legal proceeding, that's why we call it proceeding, is a process. You know, the two sides will be working towards the goal, which is either resolve that case or go to court and fight. Okay. So during that process, there are times that you can modify, you know, as long as your lawyer, you always ask for permission, approval. Okay. If they see that there's no reason for you to keep that, they will discard. They will agree. Yeah. But you do that in a discretionary manner. Yeah. Okay. So we already covered a lot of those points. Okay. So now we're gonna go to the boring part, the Latin language. Okay. The reason I wanted to bring this up is because yes. Testing, yes. Yep. Oh yeah. Throughout this 2 weeks, I'll give you ample of examples of what testing we have done. Okay. So yes, sometimes to prove a point, you need to do some basic tests. Okay. For example, in the field, you notice that the concrete failures because of chloride intrusion. But how can you prove? You cannot take samples. So you may be in the lab, you make a concrete specimen, and then you show, oh, this is the color, what happened because of chloride attack. Okay, so that is what we call a testing. Okay, and then you can show it. And if you are doing in situ testing, like doing a Schmidt hammer, okay, you can document by written. Okay, I use the Schmidt hammer, I realized that the concrete is inferior strength. Okay, you document, take a picture, and those are your testing. So testing is a loosely coined term describing all the investigations that you have done for. Yeah. Yes.
In case of oral report,
Hmm?
So that can be anything. That can be hypothetical. That may not be true. So will that be valid or not?
Say that again.
So in case of oral report,
Uh-huh.
so that can be anything. What I'm presenting the report, that can be anything. That may be hypothetical. That may not be true. So will that be valid or not?
You mean? Oh no. So the lawyers are, you know, this is the time that the lawyers will present their professional. Okay, they will ask you very specific questions. Okay, for example, they ask you, tell us what happened. Okay, so you describe, oh, the wave comes and then the building collapses, and then they will say, okay, stop right here. You say the wave comes and then the building collapses. Do you have evidence that happened? Okay, you say, well, you know, if you have evidence, for example, I have a picture to show you. Yes, then you submit, and that one will be evidence. Okay, but if you don't have, you will describe, oh yeah, I'm assuming that's what happened, but I back out my logic because I see there are a lot of water damages. You know, watermark, the steel is rusted. Okay, you can describe. And then they say, do you have evidence? I don't have evidence, but I saw that. Okay, and that is why documentation using photography is very helpful. But sometimes you don't have that. Okay, and yes, describing, because every word that you say out can carry significance. That becomes evidence as well. Because when they fight in court, they will say, okay, engineer so and so described this is what happened, and you know that. When you do a deposition, there's a person that will type up every word that you describe. Yeah. And that's another thing. You have to be experienced in settings where you know they interrupt your conversation. You'll be describing, and then the guy will be, "Can you hold for 1 minute? What did you say? Did you say strength? How do you spell strength? You know, that kind of that happens a lot. Yeah, because we use terms that people don't use. And that is why being able to lower your engineering lingos to something people understand is always very important. But you do want to use terms that are well defined in engineering, just so that you be precise. Okay. Yeah. Good questions. Yeah. Okay, now going back to Latin. Okay, so Latin language is, and I show here very funny. Okay, so the cartoon here says, "I think, therefore I am a pig." So sum is a pig, ergo is therefore, cognito means think. Okay, so we have many of this in our everyday life. For example, the U.S. dollars, they always have Latin words in the money that we have. Okay, I'm not sure about the Indian dollar, but American dollar definitely has a lot of Latin words. Okay, and then and sometimes it can be funny. Okay, so this is a comic from Astro a cartoon. Okay. But Latin language is a dead language. Nobody speaks the language anymore. Okay, but yet we use it a lot in the legal profession. Okay, good or bad, it's a very concise and descriptive language. Okay, but the most important thing why Latin is carried out in such a significance because it's the language used during the forming process of philosophy, legal, law, and politics. Okay, so people like Aristotle, their work defines a lot of what the Western civilization is based upon today. Okay, and that's why Latin language becomes really critical. Okay, some common extra, something that was derived from external. Okay, so those are language that we've been using, but maybe not on a daily basis, but when we do writings, we use. Okay, ad hoc means for specific purpose. Okay, so if we are forming a committee, it's called the ad hoc committee. Why? We form this so that we do this purpose. Okay, and after the purpose is served, we all go our merry ways. Okay, so those are words that we see every day in our daily newspaper and so forth. Okay, so very common. Okay, curriculum vitae is a person's resume. Okay, but a lot of times we like to distinguish. So curriculum vitae is a little more than more detailed than a CV. Okay, so when you graduate BTech, they always ask you, okay, write your resume 1 page. Okay, but when you become a professor, they want your curriculum. Why? Because I have done so many great things, right? So all my publications, boom, 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 suddenly it's a 100-page document. Who's going to read that? But anyway, but that's the word curriculum vitae means your life story. Okay, and then other common Latins such as ex ante, those are all words that we use on a daily basis. Okay, ex situ, in situ, and so forth. Okay, the pervasiveness of Latin language is in our common daily use. Okay, but then when you go into legal languages and logic language, it becomes a little bit different. Okay, so for example, in logic and argument Latin, okay, you may come up with something like cum hoc ergo propter hoc. Okay, so the reason people use Latin is because that is a famous statement. Okay, and the statement is saying that the correlation implies causation. What does that tell you is that if A and B are related, therefore A must have caused B. Is that always true? No. Okay, just because I'm using a really blunt example. This is a female, this is a male, so they must be husband and wife. No, right? So that kind of logic is not necessarily accurate. And in the forensic case, this is the kind of things that you would be struggling, okay? And it's very important to understand that our logic are not always right, okay? And that is why you have to watch for fallacies, okay? Most of the time in civil forensics, we are more straightforward, okay? But if you have seen those movies or TV shows like the CSI, criminal investigation, they go much more elaborate, okay? Oh, that person is dead. Why? Because he was drunk and he got hit by a car. No, but I found that in his blood there is a certain trace of toxin. Maybe somebody drugged him, okay? Somebody put poison in his alcohol. That is how he died. So he was dead before the car hits him. Wow. Can you imagine civil engineering doing that kind of investigation? Man, that building collapsed. Yeah, but you don't know that the building collapsed because the inner column actually dropped into the ground. Oh, why? Because there was a little large animal underneath and digging on the ground. We can't do that. Civil engineering, we don't do that. But there are cases where we got fascinated, like I was describing about the Tacoma Bridge, right? Even today, people are still arguing how that bridge collapsed. So you realize that even for civil engineering structures, sometimes, especially when the phenomenon goes beyond our professional training, in other words, it goes into the unknown domain, it becomes argumentative, okay? And then logic really, really plays a big part, okay? And no causa pro causa, not the cause for the cause, okay? In other words, sometimes the cause may not be the true reason for something happening, okay? So those are lingos that you may be seeing in your legal proceeding. Lawyers love to use those words, okay? And then you'll be like, what? But if you understand a little bit of those, then you understand what they are saying. Yeah. Because for them, this is daily life. Okay? When they argue against the other parties, they are trying to mentally imagine the best argument there is to defeat the opposite side. Okay? So logic and the presentation, how do you support your arguments and so forth, those are really, really out there for those lawyers and not so much for engineers. Okay. Okay, there's more of those. And I will also discuss a little bit more about this because engineering, especially forensic engineering, is really an inverse problem. Okay. You see the problem and then you're trying to imagine what happened. It's not like homework problem. Okay. If 100 plus 200 equal to 20, not always that case, okay? Okay, legal Latin. So there are a lot of legal terms in the law profession, especially when every time there is a deviation from a regular law, they have to establish another law to uphold that original law. So that's why the law profession, they read a lot of laws, okay? Their training is basically how do you establish a law so that you can protect or defend a certain scenario, incident, argument, and so forth, okay? And so there are many terms, like you may come across absolvo, okay? That means the judge has acquitted the defendant, okay? So if you're defending a company that was being under legal investigation, and then the judge say, okay, they've been absolved. That means they've been acquitted. They are no longer guilty. Okay, so that is good. Okay, and then there are others like actus reus. That means criminal act. Okay, and so forth and so forth. Alibi, affidavit. Okay, affidavit is a word that is used very common. That means a statement made under oath. Okay, and then alibi is the person that is defending you. Okay, but not the lawyer. Okay, so Grandma Mary saw that I drove the car and not hitting that wall. Okay, so she's my alibi. She saw. Okay, and so those are the legal representations and words that are commonly used. And then there are some special laws, like we were saying, common laws. Okay, there are only the lawyers understand, such as this: cessante ratione legis cessat ipsa lex. A rule of law that becomes ineffective because the reason for its application has ceased to exist. Okay. For example, in America, we have a lot of arcade laws. You're not allowed to sing in your showers on Sundays. Okay. I mean, this was dedicated 200 years ago, a law. But today, who cares if you're singing on Sunday, taking a shower, right? So those are those cessante or cessante laws, okay? Laws that are dead, okay? But there are many of those. May not necessarily relate to us, but yeah. And then causum fregit is a very important one. It means illegal entry, trespassing, okay? Consensu with consensus, extra legum against the law. And so sometimes the lawyers may in their documentation write in this kind of languages, okay? And you may not fully understand, okay? That is fine. You just ask your lawyer, okay? Your side of the defense, okay? So what are they asking me here, okay? And then he will explain, oh, this is what they mean, okay? So that communication is extremely important, okay? There are many times I have to ask my lawyer, what are they asking? Because they're trying to help you and use a very non-engineered mind to pose a question, and then trying to be tricky at the same time. Okay, so there is times they use lawyer technique, like make you really tired, asking you the same question over and over and over. Then they're trying to catch so that you misspoke. Okay, but it's those times that you have to be extremely careful. Okay, always rely on your legal representative. Okay, so they will help you to diffuse the case. There are times when I have to do a deposition and the lawyers will cross-examining me and they'll be asking, and then my lawyer will tell me, you don't have to answer this. Okay, so listen to your lawyer. Okay, and that was objection. That's not a valid question. Why do you even ask him what he had for breakfast yesterday morning? Those are things that your lawyer will, a good lawyer will protect you against those things. Yeah. Okay, just more of those legal terms. Okay, nothing that really stands out. But I think, unfortunately, right now there is no such a dictionary or professional book written for forensic engineers so that we can be familiar with the legal terms. Okay, I think those are things that are good for us to learn. Okay, so we don't have to necessarily go through all of that. I'm also trying to see if anyone that stands out that is particularly important. Oh, so fraus omnia vitiate regarding fraud. Okay, so this is a very, very tricky part about our profession. Okay, that means the assignment of blames. In other words, many times, especially when cases where somebody intentionally do something wrong, okay, then it becomes extremely critical for a forensic engineer to make sure that you don't misspoke, okay, because you may, now this is going a little bit beyond expertise, okay, maybe because of something that you say or you found, and then resulted in somebody who being assigned a blame, okay. For example, a contractor built a house. Oh, a good example would be the higher regency case, right? The contractor who modified the design may very easily be identified as a fraud because he changed the design And so the engineer who's responsible of validating his design should have done a better job in making sure that modified design is okay. But if the contractor, and a lot of contractors do that, trying to use less materials or trying to save a few dollars by use substandard, non-qualified elements, it potentially may be a fraud. And when that happens, they can go to jail. And so it becomes very important for you, and I believe in those incidents, the lawyers will particularly force you to identify that as the guilty party. In other words, you maybe ask questions such as, do you think it's the responsibility of the contractor to make sure that the materials are used properly, always buy the material that is required? So your responsibility becomes extremely important, in the fraud case. Most of the time, I personally have not been encountering any fraud except for the case for the tile, because most of the time it's an accident or something result of an action that was not done proper. So a lot of those legal terms. And all of these are in your notes. So when you get this, so we will not ask you in the finals, please define non-contende. Now, a little bit of our causation analysis, and this particular part of discussion is pertaining to the fallacies that or potential problems that may result you in creating a false causation, And I think this is another part that in our profession that we don't have enough training. In other words, it's not just about basic logic, but it's also in your scientific training in scientific investigation. And so causation is defined as the consequence of event 1 and event 2. Because event 1, you have event 2 happening. But that A to B, 1 to 2 relationship itself, when you establish that relationship, there are many opportunities for failures or for errors. So this describes causation analysis. And so statistic is a technique that really was being established so that it supports causation. And if you look at the probability of a singular causation, using a mathematic approach, there's always the actual cause and then some unrelated causes. So in the probabilistic definitions, those two may play into your data. And so for each of them, you also have a weight coefficient based on either the number of data points that you have, for each of the case, and then there's always the error function. So mathematically, we can present the probability of I is the cause of this problem in such a manner, And how do we know if it's correct? Well, from calculus, we know that you can basically define the first differential of this term, as the causation. Now, this is just an ideal case because in forensics, you could never generate sufficient data points in order to create such a case. However, this is quickly changing. So even though you may be investigating one building collapse because of concrete material bed, but every year there may be thousands of bad concrete failed constructions. Okay, so one of the exciting area in the legal profession now is the use of robotics. Okay, so in other words, people are collecting massive amount of data so that they can train artificial intelligence to make legal predictions of causes. Okay, and even legal profession opinion, such as giving you advice. Okay, so this is one area that is coming really, really quickly. Okay, in England there is already machines that can help you resolve, for example, parking ticket issues. So you don't have to call a lawyer. They have a machine that will tell you and advise you. Oh yeah, you should go to pay because your case is such and such. Okay, they will give you legal advice. Okay, and so we envision that one day this kind of probability can be established, because can you imagine how much concrete testing that we do every year? Every single highway project, you probably have thousands of cylinder tests done. So we actually have massive amount of data. Okay, so it is not uncommon, or it's very easy to imagine one day somebody will come up with a robot that would do forensics, because they were able to amass all these failed histories. Okay. Difficulty in establishing a valid model. Now we're talking about real life here. Okay. So realistically, there are many challenges in us being able to create a valid forensic cause model. Okay, and by model I don't mean a mathematical model. By model I mean, okay, this building fell because of that column collapsed. As a result, the beam fell. Okay, so that kind of very descriptive model, basic model, is very hard to establish. Why? Because many times you don't know how the actual dimension of the system. Okay, the building may be designed for 100-meter long, but the actual is maybe 96. Okay, but unless they have done some measurements before, there's almost impossible for you to know exactly. Okay, and then the damage path may be difficult. Okay, for example, this column has already collapsed. Okay, so you cannot go back and put it back together. Oh, that's what it looks like before. You don't have that. Okay, so that really hurts when you're trying to define what is the damage process or the mode of failure. Okay, environmental effects almost impossible to determine. Okay, and the load path may not be exact. Okay, and then gravitational effect is always difficult. This is especially pertaining to dynamic problem. That is why it's very difficult for you to establish whether a building fell in dynamic, okay, because you need to know the mass stiffness terms, right? And you can only assume, okay. Additional difficulties, most systems are very difficult to define, especially when you work with architects, okay. So, like recently, a very famous architect just passed away, Bei Liming. He designed the several very famous buildings, but one of the building that he designed and have a lot of problem is I think the library at Cornell University. Okay, so there are some, because the architectural ambition in designing something that has never done before sometimes may cause structural failures. Okay, but there's no way you can build a model to demonstrate how it failed. Okay, so it becomes very difficult. But model testing to validate failure is very common. One of the most famous case is Richard Feynman, who's a Nobel Prize winner, proved that the Challenger blow-up explosion by taking a plastic and put in hot water and show that how the plastic fell. Okay, so it was a very simple test, but if you are smart to be able to demonstrate something using that simple a model, that would be the optimum for forensic. Okay, something that we should always try hard to demonstrate. Okay, and the other thing is, many times the instrument to properly do an investigation is too costly, or doesn't exist, or the client refused to pay that much money to do that investigation. So all this limits on how we can build a valid model. Okay. And then again, correlation is not necessarily equal to causation. Okay. And then a typical failure analysis for forensics, you don't have enough evidence. You don't have in-between data. You don't have uncorrupted data. Okay. You pick up a specimen from the field. It may have already been touched by many, many people. Okay. And so the evidence may not necessarily. And then there are a lot of times irrelevant data happens, mixed up in the mix. And then the interruption of your investigation or analysis process. One of the challenge for me personally is the time duration for a litigation is so long, okay? And life gets in the way. So many times if you investigate a case and then they come back to you 2 years after, you mentally lost a lot of the details, okay? And that is why keep a very good record of your investigation becomes extremely important, because you can go back and study and then realize, oh, now I remember so-and-so said what, and this is what I found, and so forth. Okay, so those are really critical stuff. In fact, when I'm trying to prepare for this 2 weeks lecture, I have to go through a lot of my past records, and another problem is Microsoft Word has gone through so many versions. So some of the pictures disappear from the older Word document. Oh, I'm like, no. Okay, but that's real life. Okay, so there's no good way of keeping a straight forward documentation. So if some of the pictures you look at that looks blurry, because I probably pulled that out of a PDF file, or Okay, reasoning in failure analysis. Because of the lack of evidence, that means that it becomes more important for you to become a very logical person. Okay, your logic, it relies on your ability to reason. Okay, because of the lack of evidence, and that is why, many times we trying to come up with the best representation of what happened, okay? Either through a drawing or either through very limited study or analysis or testing. So it's very time consuming for you to not just think about doing it in the regular way that you do stuff, but you have to go back and think, okay, is that the best way to present my case? Okay, maybe I have to modify the way that I used to do something so that it can be presented in the best way. Okay, so you will never be perfect. Okay, and many of the failure analysis are opinion rather than truth, because we don't know the truth. Okay, and so the important thing is, how do you prove that you are right? Okay. The roles of expert opinion, as I described, okay, right now, worldwide, we all depend on your qualification, okay? Because I have built buildings of this type 100 times, that makes me a direct expert, okay? That's the best we can do. However, we believe that if we are trained with legal logics and investigation techniques and so forth, that will make us better experts. And I believe that kind of qualification should go beyond somebody who has done this 100 times. Okay. And license, of course, is another technical degrees, and license and professionalism, your status and so forth are all very, very important. Okay. You cannot be a legal expert if you constantly in jail. You know, so people will be like, okay, so that is a characteristic issue. Okay, your character. You know, if you're always drunk, then you know how can you do a good, proper investigation, for example? Okay, and so forth. Okay, and then there are many useful tools such as animations and so forth that you can use to help you understand what happened. You should always use those tools because that evidence remove your qualification completely. Okay, you show an animation of a building collapse, or if you can show actually a building collapse in similar way, that is stronger than any qualification. You know, because that anybody can understand. Okay, and that is something that you should always strive for. That kind of evidence. Okay, so we have discussed, and this is two logic fallacies that you always should keep in mind. Okay, if A is related to B, therefore A must have resulted in B. That is not always true. Okay, that's cum hoc ergo propter hoc. Okay, with this, therefore, because of this. Okay, that is definitely a flaw. Okay, I mean there are so many times I try to practice this even in my daily life. Okay, so I have students always, you know, do stupid stuff. Okay, so one guy came up, oh, Dr. Chen, I cannot do that. Why? Oh, because so and so told me. I'm like, did so and so do a lot of study and then he know this is factual? No, but you know. So I said, what is his credit for telling you this and you believe him and not believe me? You know, so there are, you have to practice in your daily life because it happens all the time. Oh, somebody saying that, oh, don't go to street number 5. Why? Because 5th Street, there's an accident. How do you know there is an accident? You know, I think this is the fastest path. I want to go this way. And people get into arguments because of those non-factual arguments, right? And so practice logic in your daily living, not with your spouse, okay? Especially if you're an engineer and your wife is not an engineer. You'll be like, please don't tell me this. I hate arguing about this. Okay, so there are things that, you know, don't go by the boundaries. Okay, but it is true that in everyday life you will encounter people who are totally illogical. Okay, and understand that, you know, that's your profession. Okay, and post hoc ergo propter hoc. This is something slightly different. Okay, because something happened and then the other thing happened, that means the first thing happened must result in the second thing. Not necessarily. Okay, just because you had breakfast this morning, that means you have to have lunch? No, not necessarily, right? Yeah. So these are the things that you have to keep in mind. Okay, and a few words about inverse and forward problem. So as I mentioned, everything that you learn at school are always forward until you start doing your thesis or your master's research, PhD research. Okay, but real life, everything is inverse. Okay, many of you are at the age that probably your father is gonna help you find a spouse. Okay, is that something forward? Well, there are so many girls in the world. Which one should I choose? It's not straightforward, right? And so there's guidelines that helps you find the right spouse. Okay, and so those are the critical questions that in everyday life that you have to do. Okay, so inverse problem usually means you have many possible solutions. Okay, and then there are many different types of inverse problem. So there's not just one type of inverse problem. So using using system approach. Okay, so this is a black box problem. Okay, if you have an input, go through the black box, you have an output. Okay, so that's a forward problem. 1 + 1 = 2. Okay, that is always correct. Okay, therefore, if x equals 1 and y equals to don't know equals to 2, that means y must be 1, right? So that is very straightforward. But then if I reverse, if I give you only the process, which is addition, and then the output, then you have to find the answer that is inverse. Okay, that's what we call inverse problem. And then the other type is you don't know what is this. If x equal to 2, y equal to 4, what is the function? Okay, what is the black box that carry out this relationship? Okay, then this is not straightforward. Okay, and as a matter of fact, all scientific investigations are not straightforward. Okay, and that is why it takes us 100 years to realize that, oh, light is not just wave, but it's also particle. Okay, actually more than 300 years. Okay, because it's not straightforward. Okay, you cannot just logically deduct that is the answer. Okay, and then another even more challenging, this is what we call the output only problem. Okay, you only know output. How can you know the process? How do you know the input? Okay, this is extremely difficult. So the only way to solve this kind of problem would be to accumulate a lot of outputs. Okay, and then from the outputs, see if you can either statistically or reasonably come up with the process and the input. Okay, and so these are several solution methods that you can deal with inverse problems. Okay, and always you come up with the best fit answer, the best result, kind of like curve fitting. Okay. This is what I call the ultimate inverse problem. Okay, so in the Bible there's a story about the king of Babylon. Okay, so the king one night had a dream. Okay, and when he wake up, he's like, "Oh, my dream disturbed me." So he get all his wise men and say, "Please tell me, what is the meaning of my dream?" And the wise men say, "Oh, please, king, tell me what is your dream, then we'll tell you what it means." No. If you're really wise, you should know what my dream is, and you should tell me what my dream means. That's the ultimate inverse problem. Okay, you have no clue what the king is talking about, and yet he wants you to tell him exactly what he wanted to hear. Okay, that is the ultimate inverse problem. And many times in forensic investigation, that may be the problem you're trying to solve. Okay. So, what is the academic solutions? In civil engineering, it's very difficult for us to build a building, another building, and fail them and prove that this is what caused the failures. But in forensic science, it's a lot easier. Okay, so in the U.S., as at the University of Tennessee at Knoxville, okay, they actually have a body farm. So the professor in this case is a criminal expert. Okay, he studies how people die so that they know whether it's a knife kill, poison kill, and so forth. But because human body decompose over time, okay, so his research farm is very famous because he has many dead bodies lay in the farm so that they are decomposed in different conditions and they are killed in different scenarios. And then he can collect the samples and show, So in other words, he's trying to generate a database that if you see how the body decomposes in this way, it must have because of this and such and such. Okay. So collecting as many as possible case histories or case studies is what the academics are doing today, even for civil engineering. Okay, and that is why the ASC Forensic Councils encourage people to publish your investigation, because we study your case, it may be very similar to what I'm doing. Then I can come to the same conclusion. Okay, without that, it is almost impossible for us to know everything. Okay, to perfect our skill. Okay, but that is only happens in the university setting. Okay, and that is why Dr. Sienna have been trying for years to set up a center of forensics at NITT so that we can collect this kind of evidence, because it doesn't exist today. Okay, so this is a good time to stop. That was my last slide. Any questions about this? Yes.
For example, if you will be subjected to some natural calamity,
Mm-hmm.
I want to do a rebound hammer. So how will I select the location of this?
Excellent question. What are you trying to prove using the rebound hammer?
And the location, because natural run is only a homogeneous structure.
Right.
So they have to do an investigation on a specific location.
Yes. How do you determine that location? That's your question. Yeah. Very good. Anyone? Any of you? What do you suggest?
We should identify the first.
Okay. Yeah. Let's be more specific. Okay. Let's say this building. Okay. There's a big calamity. The building collapsed. Okay. You suspect the material was wrong, right? That's why you use a rebound hammer, right? Definitely, especially it's related to concrete. Okay. So where should you do the rebound hammer testing? One, I will get to as close as possible to the failed element. In other words, if this roof collapsed because two of the beams broke, I will test on the beam, right? That's guaranteed. But only testing on the beams does not necessarily tell me everything. So I may want to test on the wall, which is built with the same material. Another beam that is intact, right? So that I know, hey, this beam didn't collapse because that beam used a poorer concrete. This one is a stronger concrete. In other words, you have to test multiple locations. Okay, but definitely some at where you suspect there is a problem. Does that make sense? Yeah. And no, that is ideal. Okay, but in reality, if there is a big calamity in this building that the whole roof comes down, you may not even have the ability to go to that beam that collapsed. So you may have to test outside just to prove. Okay, or until they remove that beam and then you test the beam. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yes.
There was a case study that I did for my thesis.
Okay.
So there was a factory shed.
Mm-hmm.
No, actually it was a building, RCC building.
Yeah.
And it had caught fire. It
Mm.
was partially destroyed because of fire.
Mm-hmm.
So the investigator did NDT tests on all the 3 floors and
Uh-huh.
found out that from the test results that the weakest part is towards the top where there was the most damage,
Mm-hmm.
and the strongest is towards the foundation.
Okay.
So
Uh-huh.
they determined it from NDT testing.
But the change in the material property, is it because of fire, or is it because? I mean, I don't understand why they would build a building that the material gets inferior, higher up.
The material
No.
was same. The damage was more.
Oh.
Top floors.
After the fire,
The
after the
upper
fire.
floors became weak, and
Okay.
lower floors was stronger.
Stronger. So the fire is from the top.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fire
Okay.
was
From the top. Okay. That's reasonable. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But they were able to test all this. Okay. Did they test it using a core sample or they test in situ? Rebound. Okay. So it's in situ. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's an interesting case.
In that case, they can go for some semi-destructive.
Yeah.
They can take some course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they can actually do some core testing.
Some assessment.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
was the thing, what happened.
Right. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yes. Hurry.
Generally, the life of a structure, almost 50 years for which you are designing.
Uh-huh.
As big as possible here,
Uh-huh.
some calamities have happened,
Yep.
the structure has failed.
Mm.
Whether the party will get the insurance amount or not.
Say that again?
Whether the client will get the, whether he can claim the insurance or on what should be paid, how much amount you can pay.
Oh, okay. So you have to understand the terms of insurance. Okay. So when you have a house insurance, you are always against certain external element. Okay. There are 2 kinds of insurance to a house. One is called the I don't know the legal term, but like your appliance at home. Okay, they are insured. Okay, so your water, your electricity, those are all have one kind of insurance. The other kind of insurance is your building insurance. Okay, the roof damage, your structural damage, and all that they will pay for. Okay, based on your condition as built or as used. You know, in other words, the day they start your insurance, that condition of your home is what they based. It's not had nothing to do with the age of the building. Yeah, but of course, if your building is very, very old, your insurance may be very high, because they realize the likelihood of you getting damaged becomes a very probable case. Then they will ask you to pay ridiculously high insurance. Yeah, but they will pay as long as that condition happens after your insurance is, you start the insurance policy. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay.
Based on the depreciation
It,
of the building also.
no. The depreciation is because of age, right? And then the depreciation is also condition, how well you.
Was 45-year-old.
Yes.
After
Yeah.
construction.
Yeah.
So that
But
time will he get the insurance if it is affected by a natural calamity?
but
Say that building was built in 1950.
Yeah.
And that was affected by tsunami. Can he get the insurance?
well, did you have insurance at the time of the tsunami?
Yeah.
Yes. Then they will pay.
They will
They have to pay. Yeah.
full amount.
They full amount. They have to. Yeah. And I will describe a little bit of our the Philippine study, because in the U.S., especially coastal buildings or flood-prone buildings, the insurance for wind damage and water damage are separate. Wind damage is the insurance company pay. Water damage is the government pay. You know, they are totally separate. So you have to prove your building damage is because of wind or water. Okay? And who pay for your insurance?
So one more,
Yeah.
let's take already structures in there for some years, right?
Uh-huh.
In that case, the calamity occurs.
Yeah.
But the structure itself will have its own degradation.
Yes.
So how to separate?
But if the insurance company is willing to pay for your degraded building, you're insured. They will pay for the damage.
How to differentiate the failures
Oh.
due to external or due to its degradation plus the addition of this factors?
Yeah. Very good question. And so you have to do investigation. Okay. Because when you use the building, you didn't know that the steel columns already corroded to, not even the original shape anymore. It is possible, okay? So when that calamity happens, if you can prove that building is not qualified to stand on its own, the insurance company will not pay for the tsunami damage. But usually you cannot tell, because once the policy starts, they have to pay, unless you prove otherwise. Yeah, unless you prove otherwise. Yes.
What is the role of the insurance company end? Like, is it after you have used it once, or you can use it for another failure on the same structure twice?
Depends on the terms of your insurance.
Okay.
How you agreed. Okay.
Generally, will they agree for paying?
Oh yeah, like cars. If you have an accident, they'll pay for your repair, but you can still insure. Yeah, but they cannot pay again. So there is in one of the legal language, it's called double jeopardy. In other words, if they already pay for this damage, they will not pay for the same damage again. Same thing. If you are being found guilty for one crime, you do the crime again, you cannot be condemned for the same crime. Does that make sense? Yeah. So insurance will not pay for the same damage. But if you drive your car, you have damage, and the insurance is still going, and then you have another damage, they will pay for both separately. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Those are very, very good questions, because as many of you grow older, start having your own family, many things are tied to insurance. Cars is just one thing. Health insurance, medical insurance. There are many. These are things that you need to have an understanding as a grown-up. Yeah, very good. Any other questions? Yes.
Nowadays, how we are using Latin language in foreign.
How do you use Latin language? Okay. One is if it tied to a certain law. Okay. So it's not up to us to use the language. The lawyer will be using those language. Okay. For example, if you have a certain evidence, okay, and then you submit from your lawyer, okay, through your lawyer to the court, and then the opposite side found an argument that proved that your law, your evidence does not support the cause, then they will use one of those Latin language, because those are law languages. They will say, okay, this is non sequitur, okay, which means that has nothing to do with this case, okay. So you're investigating that person died because of the beam fall on that person, and then you say, oh, he had 2 chapatis for breakfast. The lawyers will throw your evidence out because it had nothing to do with his death. Does that make sense? Then that's non sequitur. Yes.
In relation with my previous question,
Okay.
if there is a correlation established between the two damages or failures,
Uh-huh.
what will be the scenario then?
Okay.
If they establish,
Okay.
then like-
Yeah. So okay. Let's be
Failure for
specific.
event 1.
Yeah.
Okay, and after that, a few months later, event 2 occurs, failure 2 occurs.
Right. And then fell.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, they approach the insurance company for the second event also.
Yeah.
But what if there is a correlation between the 2 events?
Okay.
What will be the insurance company's stand?
Okay. Let's use something specific. Okay. Event 1, we can say the erosion of a rebar. Okay. For example, a bridge that some time ago the inspector found that the rebars are heavily corroded, and then after a few months, a car went by, the bridge collapsed, and the car drove into the river. Okay. Then it's up to you to prove that that collapse is related to corrosion of the rebar. Yeah.
But the investigator will be from insurance side.
No, you'll be from both sides. The insurance company and the guy that unfortunately died will also have his own investigator. And that is why this profession becomes interesting. Because then you will be going there and dig up the rebars and then do your finite element model and prove that, hey, when rebar corroded to this level, it cannot carry the weight of the truck, the vehicle. Okay? And the other side may be saying, oh man, that corrosion of the rebar is not the problem, but the problem is it already pushed the concrete, the expanded volume, and so the time of the failure is actually all the concrete underneath the rebar has already disappeared. So you don't even have the original section. You have a significantly reduced cross-section of your beam. That's why the car over. So to relate the cause, right, the rebar and the concrete, but who is to blame? The steel manufacturer or the concrete manufacturer? Yeah. Yes, yeah. So that's why this is so interesting, because you get to prove the case. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Excellent. I like the interaction. This is the purpose for this. To help you guys start thinking in a forensic manner. Okay, and then those are all valid questions. Okay.
There was a significant improvement from day 1 to day 3.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now that they start asking questions, that's very good. Yeah. Mm-hmm. What did you learn from studying the mechanical engineering building? Okay. So who went and looked at the building yesterday? One. Everybody. Okay. Everybody is the same team? 2 teams? Okay. So then maybe we shouldn't ask the question, right? Because then you'll be telling the other team what you have found. Okay, so I will refrain from asking that question. But let me reintroduce my question. Okay, so when you guys go see the building, were you able to see most part of the building? Most part of that mechanical engineering department building? Were you able to go into some of the offices and look from the inside?
We didn't study mechanical aspects, we did civil.
Oh, so you went both buildings.
Some labs are open, we can enter.
Okay, okay.
In all rooms we cannot enter. Some rooms are
That's
locked.
yep. That's good. That means real life, you have only partial observations. That's fine. Yeah.
Some outside also some more facts are there.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
The foundation.
Yeah. Did you take pictures? Yes. Some. Okay. Very good. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Today we will go on this day.
Okay. Very good. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Some team visited my room yesterday. And
Okay,
they
so-
diagnosed some problems.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not going.
Are
to
you
tell-
worried? No.
No, I'm not worried. I am very happy. I purposefully invited them.
Yeah.
You can come and see.
Right. Very good. Yeah. So you guys start to practice. That's very good. Yeah. So okay. So that's what we have for today. Okay. The names for everybody. Okay. 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 If you don't mind, I'll call out everybody's name so I can learn. Saeed Ali. Okay. Saeed.
Dharani.
Darani.
Parthiban.
Patiban. Okay, I know Patiban.
Parthiban.
K. Patiban. Oh, there's two Patiban. Okay. Patiban. Ankita. Harit. I know Harit.
Bharati.
Bharati know very well. Patiban P.
Parthiban.
Yep, I know him by
Chandru.
now. Chandru. Okay. Ati Baran.
Adiparnan, he got his leg fractured. So he
Oh.
will be coming next week.
Okay. Cyril, I know
Cyril.
very well. Yeah, Cyril.
Ketan.
Kitten. Okay. Shama.
Arjun.
Kitten. Arjun.
Arjun.
Okay. Shamim.
Shamim Banu.
Shamim Banu. Hi, Shamim.
Rajesh.
Rajesh. Okay, Rajesh.
Manoj.
Naik. Manoj.
Manoj.
Okay, Manoj. And that's Navneet in the back. Okay, so he will be giving the lecture tomorrow on the point cloud analysis. Okay. Okay, good. Yeah, so I'll slowly learn everybody's name. Yeah, this is very helpful. Okay. Okay.
So we'll go for lunch.
Go for lunch. Okay. Yeah.